Okay, now you have your new water loss detection device installed. The hardware is in the field, but the most important step is coming in and adding critical alarms. So as you'll notice on this summary listing screen from one of our current customers, you see two devices here on the screen that are showing up in red, and those are actually in an alarm state. The new device that we have added is the St. Lawrence line, and those alarms haven't been set up yet. So we're going to click on St. Lawrence line, and we're going to come over on the tag details for the device. Well, I'm sorry, the device details showing all of the different tags. The ones that we're going to really focus on are the battery voltage, this calm alarm down at the bottom, and there's a couple here that may or may not show up on your screen depending on if you have a hydrostatic analysis set up. So we're going to look at either the pressure or the absolute variance pressure. So for this first one, we're going to look at battery voltage. Once you click on battery voltage, it'll take you to the tag details for battery voltage, and you can see here a chart of the last 250 data points that have come into the system. And from here, you're going to click over on alarm set points. So if we want to add an alarm set point for the battery voltage, we're going to click on add an alarm set point. And it brings up an alarm set point wizard, so to speak, with 5 different steps you'll see up here at the top. And this first step is the logic tab. And this is basically what is the criteria that we're going to put in the system for this to alarm. Before we get into exactly what we're going to put for the battery voltage, I want to walk through kind of each of these and explain what they are. For data type, it's set by default to numeric on this tag, but just within the system, tags are represented with either numeric values or text values. Since most everything in a SCADA system is numeric by nature, then that's set to default, and some of them you can change, some you cannot. This one is set default to numeric. And then we have the comparison. What type of logic are we going to be using with this alarm? There are 3 options available. Value comparison is the value greater or less than or equal to a certain threshold. A variance percentage is the value greater or less than the average over some period of time, expressed as a percent of the average. As an example, let's say we want to set an alarm that detects if a line pressure changes by more than 15% compared to the last 12 hours. We could do that, or if we want to do it by a variance amount instead, is the value greater or less than the average of some period of time by a fixed amount. In this example, we would want an alarm if a pressure changes more than, say, 25 psi up or down over a 12-hour average. And then lastly, is the type. Is it a database alarm or is it a field alarm? The most common type of alarm is a database alarm where you fill in the criteria in the alarm value line below. You only use a field alarm if you're trying to set up an alarm set point for hardware devices that the alarm condition is determined by the hardware in the field. And that's kind of a rarity. That's for more like a I8D, I4D type of device, and that's a proprietary hardware. Okay, so now that we have it as numeric, for this one we're going to go ahead and use that value comparison. And we're going to say less than, and we're going to go with 11.8 volts on this one. And the reason being is that 11.8 is kind of the bare minimum that the device needs to operate. So anything less than that, we want to know about it. We're going to say that it's a low voltage alarm. And then this next screen shows what we're actually going to tie that alarm to. So because we came in from that tag value on the St. Lawrence line, you'll see it here filtered to St. Lawrence line, battery voltage. We're going to go ahead and click. We want to add it to that battery voltage. On notifications, this screen may or may not look like this depending on where you are in the setup process. If you're a newer customer and you haven't set up any recipients or notification lists, it's going to be very sparse, very similar to what mine looks like now. There are two different types of notifications. For the example today, I'm just going to go through kind of a one-time notification. And there are tiered schemes. And what a tiered alarm scheme means is in the event something goes into alarm, if, say, you send that alarm notification to Joe, Joe doesn't acknowledge it. 15 minutes later, you want to send another alarm to Jim. Then Jim would get the alarm and you could continue going down kind of a tree type of a scheme until somebody acknowledges the alarm. You do have options to send a notification on alarm or on clear, on both. By default, they're selected for both. So for right now, I'm just going to put myself in. I'm going to add a recipient. I'm going to put in my name, and I'm going to go ahead and change this from email to text because that's how I would prefer to get the alarm. Enter in a phone number, and then I'm going to hit save. You'll notice that now in the recipients, I do have myself in here, and it's automatically checked. So I will be the person that's getting this alarm. Next, on the actions, going back to that very first screen where you saw those two devices that were in alarm, that red was based off of right here. Actually, you can set it to whatever color you want. Depending on the types of alarms you set up, you may have a warning, a critical alarm. All of those could have different colors and values so that you kind of understand at a brief glance at the screen what really needs your attention first. And then the acknowledgement color is it's still in an alarm state, but somebody has acknowledged and is aware that it is an alarm. Then down below, you'll notice that it starts off with email messaging. Unfortunately, there isn't a way to change what goes out via text because of the way that the text works. We don't want people to put too much into a text message. It's kind of a standard. We know as far as data messaging rates, all of that, how that applies. It's just not something that we allow to be changed. But for email, you're more than welcome to do so, as well as voice message if you have voice message callouts. Next, we're going to go on to the summary. So this just gives you kind of the overall what you just did, making sure before you commit it to the system that everything is correct. So at the first, it tells you the alarm logic. The alarm set point will trigger when the value is less than 11.8 volts. It will clear whenever the value returns to 11.8 or greater. And then the alarm actions, it's going to show up in red on the screen if it's an alarm state and not acknowledged, green if it is an alarm state and has been acknowledged. The messaging is by default. It was added to the St. Lawrence line, and recipients, I have been added as a recipient. And that is the very first alarm set point being successfully added. You'll notice it's on the battery voltage, and of course now on the alarm set points tab you have this new alarm that is set here. The next one we're going to look at is the calm alarm. Same process goes for this one. We're going to come down and we're going to hover over that and click on it. And this one is a little bit different because the values for this tag, it's either a 1 or a 0. It's either in an alarm state or it's not. So this one we're going to put it to alarm when the value is equal to 1 being the alarm. And I'm going to just leave this one as a calm alarm. Same process applies. Now you'll notice it has filtered it to the calm alarm, so I'm going to add it there. And I have already been added into the system, so I'm just going to say that I'm going to go ahead and get this one again. I'm not going to change any of the defaults right now. And for the summary, the alarm set point will trigger when the value is equal to 1, which is alarm. 0 would be normal. The alarm will clear when the value is no longer equal to 1. And same thing as far as the colors on the summary listing, where it's applied, and the notifications. And that one has been successfully added. So next we're going to talk about the most important is the water loss detection alarm, and those are the ones that are dealing with your water pressure. This is where every system is going to be different. Depending on the device placement in your system, the tolerances are going to be different. On top of that, some of you will have a hydrostatic analysis, so we can use that variant, and some of you won't. If you don't have a hydrostatic analysis, reach out to our support team and they can walk you through adding one. The logic for both is similar, and I'm going to look at going through both examples. So for this first one, we're going to look at the pressure absolute variance. If you have a hydrostatic analysis for the segment of the system where the device is placed, then this pressure absolute variance tag is what we should use. The absolute variance tag looks at the difference between the measured pressure and the hydrostatic pressure, which is what your expected pressure would be. So we're going to go over here and add an alarm set point. On this one, for the pressure absolute variance tag, we want it to alert when the variance is too much. We have one customer that has a general standard of a low alarm at anything less than a negative 25 psi, and a low alarm set at negative 35, anything less than a negative 35 psi. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and trying to wrap my mind around it, mathematically speaking, is a little hard. So just as an example, this is one of our customers. They actually have 3 separate alarms set on this, but I wanted you to see the pressure absolute variance chart, because when you're saying I want it to be less than a negative number, it kind of throws the mind in a little bit of a warp, or it does, at least for me. So on this one, they have 3 separate alarms. There's a warning of a pressure less than -5. So if it drops below this line, so as it has here, they're going to get a warning saying, hey, their pressure has dropped. And then they have another one set at -15. And then this last one is an absolute critical alarm set at -20. So that kind of gives you an understanding of if it's less than this -5, if it's less than this -15, less than this -20. So if we go back to the alarm set point, then for this one, I'm going to say anything less than a -25, I'm going to put that as a low pressure. I'm going to add that to my pressure absolute variance. And then again, going through, just going to add it to myself. Same logic steps for the usage, notification, and actions are going to be the same for all alarms. It's just that logic piece that's going to be a little bit different. So that one has been added. And the last one we're going to talk about is if you don't have that hydrostatic analysis, you're going to not actually even see these pressure absolute variance or the hydrostatic analysis. So you'll just have this pressure tag, and we're going to go in and add an alarm set point. And this one is kind of a more simplistic. If your line pressure or if drops below a certain value is when it's going to alarm. So in this instance, I'm going to say normally this line has at least 80 pounds of pressure. If it drops below that, I want to be notified. So alarm when the value is less than 80. Add it to my pressure tag. Again, I'm going to do a one-time notification to myself. And add the actions, the summary, and that set point has been added. That kind of concludes the basics of the 3 alarms that we would say that need to be added to a device. Of course, I mentioned a couple of different customers and how they had set theirs. It's really up to you and your best practices to see what works for you. If you have any questions, please reach out to our support team. We are more than happy to help you set up alarms. Have a good afternoon.